Imagine living in a brand new country. Your parents tell you stories about the Great War of Independence, how brave men fought against the British Empire, the most powerful empire in the world, and won freedom in 1776. But now, only 36 years later, that same empire is back. And they are angry. Very angry. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, because every week, I bring you stories of courage, survival, and history's forgotten battles. And I promise, today's story will keep you hooked until the very last second. In the early 1800s, the United States was still small. Only 18 states existed at the time. Most people were farmers, merchants, or sailors. Life was simple, but it was also hard. The oceans were dangerous. American ships sailed across the Atlantic to trade goods like cotton, tobacco, and grain. But the British Navy, the strongest on earth, ruled the seas. And they did something cruel. They stopped American ships, searched them, and forced American sailors to work for Britain's navy. This was called impressment. Imagine this. You are a young sailor, maybe 20 years old, on your way home. Suddenly, a British ship pulls up. Soldiers grab you, tie your hands, and say, "You now work for the king. You may never see your family again." This happened to thousands of Americans. Families cried. Mothers prayed. Fathers grew angry. And slowly, the United States began to feel humiliated. Leaders in Washington could not stay silent. By 1812, President James Madison faced pressure from every side. Merchants shouted, "Britain is ruining our trade." Families cried, "Bring our sons home from British ships." And fiery politicians, called the war hawks, demanded action. They said, "We fought for independence once. We can do it again." Finally, on June 18, 1812, the United States Congress declared war on Great Britain. The people cheered. The newspapers celebrated. They believed America was strong enough to win. But here's the truth. The United States was not ready. The U.S. Army had fewer than 12,000 trained soldiers. The Navy had only 17 ships. 17! Meanwhile, Britain had hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, and the experience of fighting Napoleon's armies in Europe. It was like a small child trying to fight a giant. The young nation was brave, yes. But bravery alone would not be enough. Let's pause and think about what this meant for ordinary families. Imagine you're a farmer in Virginia. You've just planted corn with your son. Suddenly, a letter arrives. Your boy has been drafted into the army. He's never even held a real gun before. Or imagine you're a merchant's wife in Boston. Your husband sails out to trade goods. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. Then news arrives. His ship was captured by the British. He has been forced to serve on their warship. You may never see him again. This was the reality of 1812. Fear, anger, confusion. A nation about to face the storm of war. And so, the War of 1812 began. A small, unprepared country standing against the world's greatest empire. What would happen next? Would the United States survive, or would Britain crush the young nation and take back control? The year was 1812. War had been declared. But declaring war is easy, fighting it is another story. The United States believed it could strike quickly. The plan? Invade Canada, which was then under British control. The war hawks in Congress said it will be simple. We'll march right in and Canada will welcome us as liberators. But things did not go as planned. American forces, poorly trained and badly supplied, stumbled into battle. Some soldiers didn't even have proper uniforms. Many used old muskets from the Revolutionary War. When the U.S. Army marched north, they were met by British soldiers, Canadian militia, and Native American warriors led by the brilliant Shawnee chief, Tecumseh. At Detroit, the American General William Hull became so frightened by reports of native warriors that he surrendered without even firing a shot. Imagine the shame. Thousands of U.S. soldiers handed over their weapons without a fight. Across the border, the story was the same. American forces tried again and again to invade Canada. Each time, they were pushed back. At Queenston Heights in October 1812, American troops crossed the Niagara River, only to be crushed by British and Canadian forces. They fought bravely, but poor leadership and lack of reinforcements doomed them. The truth was clear: America was not ready to invade Canada. The early battles left the young nation humiliated. But while the army struggled on land, something surprising happened at sea. The U.S. Navy was small, only 17 ships compared to Britain's hundreds. But American ships were fast, well-built, and crewed by determined sailors. On August 19, 1812, the USS Constitution, nicknamed Old Ironsides, met the British warship HMS Guerriere in the Atlantic Ocean. Cannons roared. Smoke covered the waves. British cannonballs bounced off the Constitution's thick wooden hull, as if the ship were made of iron. The Americans fired back with deadly accuracy, tearing the Guerriere apart. When the battle was over, the British ship was a wreck, and the American crew cheered. News of the victory spread quickly. Crowds in Boston and New York celebrated. For the first time, the people believed, maybe we can stand against Britain after all. It was a small victory, yes, but it lit a fire of hope in a dark time. Meanwhile, ordinary families carried the weight of the war. Merchants suffered as Britain's navy blockaded American ports. Ships sat empty at docks. Goods rotted. Farmers could not sell their crops. Prices rose. Food became scarce. Women held families together while husbands and sons went off to fight. Some prayed each night for letters that never came. Children grew up faster, learning to work the farms, mend clothes, and care for younger siblings while their fathers were away. War was not just fought on battlefields. It was felt in every home, every town, every church pew where people knelt and asked God for strength. The War of 1812 had begun with dreams of glory, but early defeats shook the nation's confidence. The army was weak. The economy was suffering. And yet, there was hope. On the seas, American ships proved they could match the mighty Royal Navy. Small victories gave courage to a young country still finding its place in the world. But soon, the storm would grow darker. Because while America struggled, Britain was preparing a strike so bold, so devastating, that it would change history forever. By the summer of 1814, the United States was in serious trouble. The dream of conquering Canada had failed. The army was weak, money was running out, and people were tired of war. But Britain was stronger than ever. In Europe, the Great War against Napoleon had ended. Now, Britain could send its best soldiers, its most powerful ships, across the ocean to crush America once and for all. And their eyes turned toward the heart of the young nation, Washington, D.C. British generals believed that if they could capture and burn the American capital, the people would lose hope and beg for peace. They prepared their attack carefully. A fleet of warships sailed up the Chesapeake Bay, carrying thousands of battle-hardened soldiers. These were men who had fought Napoleon in Europe. They were skilled, disciplined, and ruthless. The Americans knew they were coming. But were they ready? No. The U.S. Army was small and scattered. Many soldiers were poorly trained militia. President James Madison himself worried, how can we protect our capital with so few men? On August 24, 1814, the British marched toward Washington. The Americans rushed to stop them near a small town called Bladensburg, Maryland. The battle that followed was a disaster. American troops, confused and poorly led, broke ranks and fled. Some ran so fast that later, people joked it was the Bladensburg races. President Madison and government officials had no choice but to escape. The road to Washington was open. The enemy was coming. By evening, British troops entered Washington, D.C. The city was silent, abandoned. The soldiers marched to the Capitol building. They stacked furniture, papers, and books in the chambers, and set them on fire. Flames shot into the night sky. Next, they marched to the White House. First Lady Dudley Madison had already fled, but not before saving a famous painting of George Washington. She carried it to safety, refusing to let it fall into enemy hands. When the British entered the White House, they found a feast laid out, food prepared for the president's dinner. They sat, ate, and drank in mockery. Then, they poured oil and gunpowder on the floors and set the White House ablaze. The fire roared. The walls cracked. The night sky glowed red as flames consumed the capital of the United States. For the first time in history, America's heart burned. But then, something strange happened. As the fires raged, the skies darkened. A massive thunderstorm rolled over the city. Lightning flashed. Thunder shook the ground. Winds so fierce they toppled chimneys and lifted cannons. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking the flames. The fires that threatened to destroy Washington were slowly beaten back by nature itself. Some witnesses believed it was divine intervention. They called it the storm that saved Washington. The British, exhausted and drenched, decided not to stay. The next morning, they marched back to their ships, leaving behind a city in ruins, but not destroyed. The capital was a blackened shell. The White House was a smoldering ruin. Smoke still curled into the sky as families returned to their broken homes. America had been humiliated. Its capital city had been burned by a foreign power. And yet, the nation did not collapse. Instead, the people grew angry, determined to fight harder. The burning of Washington, meant to break the spirit of America, had the opposite effect. It lit a fire of resistance across the land. So the capital burned, and a storm saved it. But the war was not over. The British turned their attention to Baltimore, where one of the most important battles of the war would soon take place. And on a night filled with rockets, bombs, and thunder, a flag would rise, inspiring a song that still echoes today. Imagine standing on the shore in the dead of night. The sky explodes with fire. Rockets hiss through the air. Bombs rain down from the heavens. And in the distance, you wonder, will our flag still be flying when the sun rises? This is the story of Baltimore, 1814, the night America almost lost everything, but gained something far greater: hope, courage, and a song that would live forever. After burning Washington, the British weren't finished. Their next target was the city of Baltimore, a busy port filled with ships and supplies. If Baltimore fell, America would lose one of its most important cities. So the British sent a huge force, 19 warships and nearly 5,000 soldiers. But unlike Washington, Baltimore was ready. The people of the city built defenses, dug trenches, and stood side by side, prepared to fight. At the heart of it all stood Fort McHenry, guarding the entrance to the harbor. If the fort fell, the city would fall. If the fort held, Baltimore would stand. On the night of September 13, 1814, the British began their attack. From their ships, they fired bombs, rockets, and shells at the fort. The explosions lit up the night sky. The ground shook with thunder. For 25 hours, the bombardment continued. Boom! Crash! Screams! The defenders huddled in the fort, determined to hold the line. They had one symbol of hope: a massive American flag, 30 feet high, 42 feet wide, flying proudly over the walls. Every time the bombs lit the sky, soldiers and citizens looked up. Was the flag still there? Yes. It waved defiantly in the smoke and fire. Far from the fort, a man watched the battle with his heart pounding. His name was Francis Scott Key. He was a lawyer who had boarded a British ship to negotiate the release of an American prisoner. The British agreed to free the prisoner, but they would not let Key leave until the battle was over. So there he was, stuck on a British ship, forced to watch the attack on his homeland. Hour after hour, he prayed. Every explosion made him fear the worst. But each time lightning flashed or a bomb burst in the air, he searched for the flag. And still, it waved. As the long night dragged on, the British kept firing. The defenders inside Fort McHenry were tired, wounded, and scared. But they never surrendered. Finally, on the morning of September 14th, the guns fell silent. The smoke cleared. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, Francis Scott Key lifted his eyes. There it was, tattered, torn, full of holes, but still standing. The American flag. The sight overwhelmed him. Tears filled his eyes. He pulled out a piece of paper and began to write words that flowed from his soul. "Oh, say can you see, by the dawn's early light." The song he wrote that morning would one day become the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem of the United States. The British, shocked by the strength of Baltimore's defenses, gave up and sailed away. The city had stood. The fort had stood. And the flag had stood. News of the victory spread quickly. It gave hope to a nation that had seen its capital burned. It reminded Americans that even in their darkest hour, they could endure. The War of 1812 would continue for a few more months. But the defense of Baltimore became a turning point, a symbol that America would not be destroyed. So the flag stood, and a song was born. But the war was not yet over. The British would try one last time to crush America, with a massive invasion of the South. And in the swamps and fields of Louisiana, a young general named Andrew Jackson would rise. The final and bloodiest battle was about to begin. And it would change the future of the United States forever.